I mean, balanced Druid power is really actually cool in Dragonflight if you haven't seen or played balanced Druid in pre-patch. Although it is kind of nutty right now, in Dragonflight it's a little bit more tempered, yet still retains the fun aspect, and it looks like it could slap an AoE. It could do like a lot of damage in AoE. It could dominate the AoE. Because of Starfall, one word, which is why I have came a long way around to liking balanced Druid in the Dragonflight iteration, since I love Starfall and I love caring about my resources in AoE. That and more we're going to talk about in today's video for balanced Druid in Dragonflight, if it's going to be the AoE monster that you want it to be, especially in keys, but also in raids, because in raids it kind of did well in the last couple of years, and it's probably still going to do well in the next couple of years. But before we go forward, if you like the type of content and you want to see what more we can do with our amazing brains, you can also check our stream on twitch.tv/Marcelian online, where we stream a bunch of days a week, a little bit less this week around since we have a lot of projects going on. But come Dragonflight release, we will have a special stream ready for you guys, so stay tuned for that. Drop a follow, have a chat, maybe even play some keys and raids with us, and it will be awesome. With that out of the way, let's actually talk about why balanced Druid is so explosive and why Marcelian is gonna see my fat chicken in the party in Dragonflight for the foreseeable future. Since normally in these types of videos we talk a little bit about the talents actually stand kind of core to what the spec is going to be like, since there are no more external player powers that you need to grind or farm or legendaries or anything like that, so it all comes down from the talents and how the build kind of, flourishes into this majestic, not for the general Druid talent. We've talked about this before, and it's kind of weird. I was never really a fan of how the Druid general talents are set up, in that you kind of access a bunch of your basic kit through the talents, so you can actually, never take Boomkin form or Star Surge if you want to as a balanced Druid, which is weird. But you can definitely do that, which is, I don't know if that's something that should be there. However, really weird the general talent trees for Druids are, it seems like they kind of work somehow. It's pretty obvious, if you take away the trolling aspect of, oh, I just want to take cat abilities in my balance form and never take a balanced Druid, and I just stand in caster form and I'm never a fat chicken, then sure, you can do that. But outside of that, you can definitely specialize in whatever form you want. The capstones are not particularly strong, which I guess that's probably good, because they're very difficult to reach if you want especially a specific one, let's say one that's not on the balance side of the talent tree, which is on the right hand side. Maybe you want someone on the left hand side. They're not particularly amazing, so you don't really feel like you're missing out by, actually picking the abilities that your spec needs and not going for what would actually be cool. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the actual balanced talents. And first of all, I do want to touch, although it's, it's a talent now, but Starfall. So Starfall has been changed, and this stands at core of why balance is a lot of fun, but it's not the only reason. First of all, Starfall right now can stack, which is amazing, because in Shadowlands, for whatever reason, the concept was that Starfall is going to have a cooldown. There's going to be a bunch of benefits. You had the Stellar Drift talent, which I think with the Stellar Drift talent, it did more damage, and you could also cast while Starfall was up, which was kind of okay, but kind of not really, because Starfall was realistically the only AoE spender for your resource, and because your only AoE spender was on a cooldown, you didn't really have anything else to spend your resources, Astral Power in this sense, on, so you just ended up just spamming Starfires and overcapping Astral Power, which it falls off in the long run. And that's kind of why I didn't particularly like Balanced Ring going into Shadowlands, because I didn't really care about a big part of its toolkit, which is not really what you should do. But in Dragonflight, that all changes, because Starfall right now, not only can it stack, it doesn't have a cooldown, you can just like spam it and it actually feels really good. You also have the baseline extension of the Moonfire and Sunfires by 2 seconds baked into talents, and you can even extend it further with other augment talents and even make it stronger. This is one aspect of it. The other thing that I did want to talk about Balanced Druid, which personally I find incredibly cool and enjoying, but I hear a lot of you guys saying that it's not your cup of tea, and that is the Mastery rework. Mastery, essentially Astral Invocation, which is the name now, makes it so that enemies take more damage based on what dots they have. So they take more nature damage if you have Sunfire on them, and they take more arcane damage if they have Moonfire on, and obviously Astral damage, since it's both, it double dips into it, and it's actually really cool. Meaning that obviously in single target doesn't really change much because you're gonna have your dots on the boss anyway. But in AoE, you do want to prioritize spreading Moonfire and Sunfire to as many targets as possible, which I particularly love. It's a fun mechanic. It's really cool to spread your dots. It kind of is slightly weak in low-level dungeons, and you might see some of them on stream right now, where we played a bunch of heroics, and things just die really quick before you end up actually gaining a lot of damage. So trust me, once things live a decent amount of time, Boomkin is going to pop in terms of damage. But that's kind of like what you probably should be expecting if you are decently geared as Boomkin and you're going into the dungeons. Unless you're pushing Mythic Plus a little bit higher than your eye level, you won't see yourself rank, or maybe you will, but it takes a little while to get the damage rolling, right? You don't need like super high keys for it, but the dots really take a while because you need a couple of globals. And this is maybe one only little tiny gripe that I have with it, is that there has to be, I believe that they should make Moonfire apply to two. If they're gonna keep the mastery the way it is, I think that Moonfire applying to 2 targets should be baseline, and they should have a talent that makes Moonfire apply in AoE like Starfire, or Sunfire rather. And if they have to put that way further down into the talent tree, okay, sure, but you still, like, if you pull a pack of like 8 mobs, because let's say the soft cap starts at 8 targets, then you still have to cast 4 Moonfires and then 1 ideally Sunfire if they're all clumped, maybe more than 1 if they're not clumped, and that's basically what, 5 globals of you not actually doing any damage. And then you actually either start working towards your first Eclipse and then pop your cooldowns and then start to spend your Astral Power, unless you gain Astral Power since, in which case you delay everything. So this is maybe one of the gripes that I have with the rotation, which actually, weirdly enough, I kind of like, because kind of figuring this out is really fun. But I can see how this can be tedious for other people, and it can get tedious in the long run. So maybe something like this can be addressed later on into the expansion, because we did actually get kind of, but not really, a confirmation that they will be keeping on tuning and, you know, reworking the talents as the expansion launches as well. So they won't stop now and then see you in 10.1, which is actually really awesome and really surprising. And not to mention, it's kind of, you know, hopeful for the specs, because constantly having to reiterate and, you know, balance and tune the specs just keeps the game way more fresh, and we're not stuck into like, oh, this is just feels bad, we just have to suck it up. So I think this is a good direction in which they're going, and makes me very hopeful for Boomy. Not only is already super fun, but making sure that we fix even some of these little issues could be potentially amazing. Now, another thing that actually works really well with the dots, and why I actually don't mind and why it doesn't feel that bad to have to, you know, spend so many globals to dot, is because of Orbit Breaker, which is the talent that I think it was renamed. Basically, it's the Torghast power, which, yes, so basically the Torghast power, if you don't know, if you haven't played Torghast with balance, is every, what is it, 30th or 50th Moonfire tick, you slam down a full moon on the target. Now, this doesn't work just for Moonfire, this works for any dot, so basically every 30th shooting star calls down a full moon at 80% of its power. And shooting stars essentially makes Moonfire, Sunfire, and Stellar Flare damage over time have a chance to call down a falling star. And during Eclipse, the shooting stars happen 100% more often. So obviously you kind of want to be in Eclipse all the time. And the more dots you have out, especially Stellar Flare, which you usually only take in single target, and we will get to that in a second, the more Orbit Breaker charges you accumulate, and the more full moons drop down, and the more Astral Power generate, not to mention the damage that the full moon does, because it's actually really cool. And seeing a moon just pop on the ground is just hilarious, man. I just love it. Everything about chicken is crazy. And going into this, we have the Orbital Strike talent, which you might have played with in beta right now. Previously was named Syzygy. Now it's Orbital Strike. So essentially, if you pick it, it's underneath Celestial Alignment. Makes your Celestial Alignment also work kind of like the Evoker Deep Breath, where you choose like a big area in front of you, and you activate it, you get the Celestial Alignment buff, and in that area there's like a beam of lunar power or whatever, blast that target and apply Stellar Flare to everybody, which is crazy. And you don't have to have Stellar Flare talented to get this effect, so that adds essentially a 3rd dot in an AoE pack. So this could be potentially amazing in bigger keys and on fortified weeks where things just last a long time. Every 2 or 3 minutes, depending on, you know, what talent augmentations you take, you can apply 3 dots to everybody in AoE and then just have like orbit breaker stacks for everybody. So it just scales really cool. The higher in key you get, the more mobs you fight, the more dots you have out, and I think that's a cool mechanic as opposed to just from the slap burstiness of the Boomkin, which you can still do. You don't have to, I mean, you probably will still have to apply dots, but there are definitely other things that you can do. For instance, you also have wild mushrooms, which are back, which I believe this was a spell back in the day when I didn't play Boomkin, but it's actually really cool. It's an extra button, it slaps AoE, generates astral power, and you can also take the upgrade from it with the talent just below it, fungal growth, that makes it apply a dot to everything around, which is also really cool. I don't think this definitely doesn't trigger shooting stars, and if it does, it's probably not by intention, but it is an extra dot, so it is actually really cool. Plus, on top of all of these cool things, you have so many talents that just augment a lot of aspects of your rotation and playstyle. You have talents that increases astral power gain if you want to like constantly spam astral power, if you're playing something like you know, Arcanic Pulsar, which has been nerfed, and to be honest, this is something that I'm not particularly a fan of. I don't know if the nerf to Arcanic Pulsar is gonna stick. It takes so long to build the stacks now that it just I sometimes just forget that I even have it there, which is, I don't know if it's something that you want for a talent. However, I don't know if Orbital Strike is better than Pulsar still, so we'll have to see how we turn out in the end. But not only this, you have a lot of talents that augment Eclipses, because we talked about, you know, shooting stars being better in Eclipses. You have talents that make Eclipses stronger, where you do more damage in Eclipse or generate astral power more in Eclipses. You have basically pretty much every aspect of your rotation being augmented in a way with a specific talents, which is actually kind of cool, because obviously you cannot get everything, so you can kind of focus on the things that you like, or, you know, just copy paste the best build. But if you just want to experiment, I feel like the balanced Druid tree just gives you different style of playstyles, which is amazing. Not to mention you have like really strong kind of capstones, but not really. You have balance of all things that make Eclipse you know, fishing and constantly being Eclipse really strong. Balance of all things, if you don't know, was the Shadowlands legendary, was the best legendary in season 1. We're going into an Eclipse. As soon as you activate it, you get a bunch load of crit that kind of trails off by the end. So now that you're not forced to, you know, cycle Wraths and Starfires anymore to get those Eclipses, you can just like, if you're, let's say, in single target, you just spam Starfire twice, you get Solar Eclipse, and then you just get every bonus that you want. And then once you're out, you can do 2 Starfires again and get Solar Eclipse again. You don't have to like cycle the Eclipses anymore. So this gives you a little bit more control over your damage profile and what you want to do, which is kind of cool. And not to mention Sundart Firmament, which is actually a really cool, and it doesn't really, I don't know. So this kind of flies under the radar. So every other Eclipse creates a Fury of Valoon at 20% effectiveness that follows your current target for 8 seconds. 20% effectiveness is kind of low, but it does still generate astral power. It is super flashy, and it's so cool to see it all around. I think Balance is slightly going into the realms of Elemental Shaman of being like the coolest visual spec that you can play, and it's really satisfying to consume astral power right now, which is a big plus for me, and why Balance is probably going to be one of the main alt specs that I will play, and my go-to DPS spec in Dragonflight, at least in season 1. So what do you think? Do you think Balance is gonna be the spec for you to beat, to smash AoE and get all that big pumpers going? Let us know in the comment section down below. Thank you, patrons, for supporting the video, and we will see you in the next one. Love you all. Bye-bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.